Hey, what's up? It's Jake from Nimbus DevOps, and today I'm going to be building a multi-node cluster with Kubernetes using Vagrant to set up my nodes and the kube admin tool from the Kubernetes documentation. So let's go ahead and get started. In order to speed this process up, we're going to use a Vagrant file to build all of our nodes, and we're going to do one master node and two worker nodes. Rather than go through the process of going over Vagrant, which isn't the point of this video, we are going to borrow one from somebody else. So Code Cloud Hub has a repo with a CKA course that you can find on Udemy and in codecloud.com, which I highly recommend. Very, very, very good resource. But anyways, we're just going to git clone this repo, which I already did, and then I'm going to use this Vagrant file and just run a Vagrant up. I'll go ahead and pause the video, and this is going to build the 3 nodes I need to get started. Okay, and we're all done. And now I have a master node and I have 2 worker nodes. So the next we need to use the documentation from Kubernetes to install the kube admin tool. So before we begin, we need a Linux host. There's some CPU and RAM requirements. They have to be connected on the same network, have unique host names, MAC address, etc. And certain ports have to be open with swap disabled. So if you go back and look at our file here, our Vagrant file, you can see there's some network stuff that was happening here with some variables, which they just used this same subnet CIDR block for the first 3 octets. And they all have different names. So pretty much all this is taken care of inside of our Vagrant file. So we don't need to verify any of this stuff. The first thing we'll need to do is install a container runtime. So we'll go ahead and use Docker because that's the most common. So if you see here what I did, the documentation's changed. So if you select container runtime, and then on the container runtime page, I can pick Docker engine. And then from here, it'll tell you what you need to do. But what I usually do is I'll go off the Docker page for the installation. So in order to get started, you have to do these prerequisites. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this guy. And this has to be installed on every node. So we're going to use Vagrant to connect and say Vagrant SSH kube master. And then I'm just going to open a new window completely and Vagrant SSH kube node 01. And then split this terminal and Vagrant SSH kube node 02. So now I can cat that into the file. And this guy, and this guy. And then we need to mod probe overlay. Kube node 1, kube node 2, master. BR net filter. Master. Kube node 1, kube node 2. And then system control parameters required for reboots. We're going to validate all these settings and we're done too. And then we're going to apply these parameters without rebooting. Okay, looks good. Alright, so now we can verify this. Overlay module and everything is set. So BRNet filter 0, bridge, BRNet. So this is just there. We're just trying to confirm that the setting is in fact there. And then the same for the overlay. It is there. So is that one. Then we want to verify the network settings that we set up. So you can see here, this is for IP tables and IP forwarding. So master, it's all set to 1. Worker, all set to 1. Other worker, all set to 1. Cool. So those prerequisites are done. So now we can go ahead and take a look at our container runtimes. So we don't need to configure this part only because we're already using systemd um, with the operating system that I'm using, so we don't need to worry about that. But we do need to install a container runtime. So here's our container runtimes. Here's our operating system, Ubuntu. So I'm now in the Docker documentation. You see I got there install on each of your nodes, install Docker for Linux. So I went here, I clicked on Ubuntu, and then I can see here uninstall any old versions, which we know we don't have, but for the sake of being complete, I will go ahead and do that. And then the installation method, we're just going to use a repository. So we'll go ahead and run an update on all three. And then we're going to install CA certificates, curl, and a couple other things. Okay. We're going to add the GPG key. Let's see, unsafe ownership, that's fine for now. And then we need to set up this repository so it knows where to find all of these updates. And then go ahead and install it using the regular update. Get this guy. Cool. Now, key rings, update again. There we go. And then we can actually do the installation. Docker, the CLI, container DIO, with a couple plugins. Do you want to continue? Yes. 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 Okay, and then we can just run. Now this says, of course, because it's Docker, to run a hello world container to make sure it's running. I am not really wanting to do that. So I can just do like a Docker PS, and I can see that the Docker CLI is working, and that Docker is actually running. So we could do like a sudo system control status Docker and see that it's running. Okay, so you want to double check that it's running on all of your nodes. And once you have a container runtime installed and we have the prerequisites installed, we can go ahead and start the process of installing kubeadmin, kubelet, and kubectl on all the nodes. So we are using a Debian-based distribution, so we will just be using this option here. Some of this stuff like CA certificates has already been installed. Some of it hasn't. And then we need the GPG key. I think this one will be fine. Yep. Okay. And then we need to add this Kubernetes repo. Boom, boom, boom. If you have something like Ansible or Terraform or something like that, you could actually set all this up in one like Terraform reply. But I'm doing it manually just to kind of go through it. Me running Terraform reply and being like, there, it's done, doesn't really help anybody. All right, now let's go ahead and get some stuff installed. And then we're going to put a hold on it with update issues. Hold apt mark. Okay, and then we don't need this driver. So the next thing we need to do is to use the kubeadmin tool to actually create the cluster. So in order to do that, we have to meet these requirements, which we do. Install a single control plane Kubernetes cluster, and then a pod network. So that's what we're going to do. So we already have all this stuff done. We've already prepared everything. So basically we need to get to the point where we're going to do this thing called kube init. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on here, but basically what we're going to do is a kube init, and we're going to give it a pod network, and then we're going to give it an API server advertise address. So I'll tell you what that is real quick. So if we were to look at the IP addresses of everything, especially like this kube master specifically, you'll see that it's using 192.168.56.2. That's its IP address. So this is what we're going to call the API server advertise address, because we want to advertise the API server of this master node so that we know like this is where the API server for master node is. And then we're just going to give it a CIDR range for the pod network. So I can run kube admin init and then -- pod network CIDR equals 10.244.0.0/16. That's the IP addresses of all of the everything inside the pod or inside the cluster, and -- API server advertise address is going to be 192.168.56.2. And you'll see that I have an issue because it says the container runtime isn't running. So the easiest thing to do is to do and you'll see this error. There's actually a second error you might run into, like sudo system control restart containerd. And sometimes that's all you need, but sometimes it's not. And so what happens is there's actually a stupid little file that we need to remove that messes things up. So etc containerd config.toml. You gotta remove that file, restart containerd, and now it's working. Why do you need to do this? I'm not exactly sure, but I tried a bunch of stuff and that's what ended up working for me. So I'll go ahead and pause this as this takes a very long time. All right, we are done. I was kind of hoping this was going to happen. I got an error, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to run the same command, -- v equals 5 for a verbosity of 5 for the logs, and we can see what's going on. Sometimes you have to use a command, something called kube admin reset, and you actually have to reset everything and rerun it again, which requires deleting a bunch of files and doing a bunch of stuff like that. So we'll see if I run it with verbosity, what the logs say, and it'll either work magically the second time, or I can go in and clean it up and reset it and show you how to do that too. Okay, so we're gonna run kube admin reset then. Okay, gonna reset as sudo and wait for that to finish. Okay, and we can see here that we need to remove this guy. Reset does not clean IP tables, which is fine. Okay. Reset tables, and then the kube config file has to be removed, which we can do that as well. No such file or directory. Oh, yeah, because we didn't get to the end. Okay. So let's run an init again and see if this works. Usually a network problem. Okay, and it's finally finished successfully. So we need to make this directory home/.kube, and then we're going to copy the admin conf to this kube config directory. and then chown it so that I can run kubectl as my user. And then what we need to do is we need to deploy a pod network, and you run kubectl apply -f and then whatever the YAML file is, and we can grab these at this link here, and we can see that there's all these different options. So we can basically just pick one. So I'm just going to pick WeaveNet. That's what I tried the first time. And then we can see here it gives us the GitHub path to the YAML file. So I can literally just copy this, and then we can paste it into here. If I remember to copy, paste. There we go. There's our pod network. And then it says once you have the pod network, then we run this command as root. So I'm just going to copy that, and then we're going to go sudo, and then we're going to join this, and it says you can join any number of worker nodes, and I'm not going to run this on master, by the way. You can join any number of worker nodes by running the following on each as root. So come here and run this as sudo. Hang on a second. What is wrong here? --v equals 5. Container runtime is not running. Okay, so we got to do the same thing with the container d. So sudo rm etc container d /config toml, and then sudo system control restart container d. Do it on this one as well. I don't know why that's taking so long. Let's see, container d system. Config.toml. And then sudo system control restart container d. There we go. Why is this not working? Vagrant SSH Vagrant. Okay, I'm gonna have to close this. These terminals are getting stale. Okay, let's try this again. This is gonna get mad because I'm not sudo that pre-flight checks. That's what it should be saying. All right, so we split this. Vagrant SSH cube node 02, and then there we go. Sudo system control status container d. All right. Sudo join my already exists. Okay, so I went ahead and removed these two files as it said that they already existed, which tells me that they're not supposed to exist. And then I'm going to run this join command, and we can see now the error I have is port 10250 is in use. So now I gotta go stop that. Okay, let's go take a look. So I can see here it's listening. There's nothing running, I don't think. Let me go check. Okay, I went ahead and restarted this node, and that seemed to have solved the problem. So I think there was something stale because there was no process ID running on that port, and the port was listening, so I'm not sure exactly what was going on. So we can go to our master node, Vagrant SSH cube master, and we should be able to run a kubectl get nodes, and see our master and then our 2 worker nodes. And there we go. So it's finally working. So now that it's working, what you can do is you can take any deployment or whatever and just go run it, and it should work just fine. Just to do a little test, I'll do like a run nginx images nginx and just see if it creates something, so we know that at least it's working as intended. Okay, get pods, it's working. Alright, so it looks like it's working. And you can look at any of my other videos about deploying applications. And you deploy whatever you want, but there we go. So I went ahead and went through troubleshooting, and that is deploying a multi-node cluster using Vagrant and VirtualBox.